Namaskar to one and all, and a gigantic welcome to everybody for participating, taking the brilliant choice of participating in this webinar. I know that it will be very valuable, not only for all of you, but for me also. I'm very interested to hear these presentations on Ayurveda and the profound link that it has with naturopathy, that you cannot separate the two practically. Indeed, the fundamental book of the propounder of Ananda Marga, the fundamental book about health, which he put so much of his time and energy into, called Yogic Treatments and Natural Remedies, for so many of the diseases, I never bothered to count what percentage of them, but probably much more than half of them. He did comment on their relationship with the Ayurvedic diagnosis, and in many cases, maybe again most cases, among the remedies that he prescribes, many of them are Ayurvedic. And yet, the science of Ayurveda is not very well understood among the broader yogic community, and it deserves our attention. And we should learn as much about it as we can, so that we can better take care of ourselves, as well as help to take care of our friends and family and others that we know. We have a very good program, speakers today. One of the speakers, Ram, he will not be able to attend because of the play of the cosmic mind. In the last moment, within the last hours even, he developed some strong headache. So who knows if it's Omicron is around. But the fact is that all of us who pay attention to the systems of naturopathy and Ayurveda, we are able to weather those symptoms very quickly and pass them. I myself got the effects of COVID twice over the last many months and got rid of it very quickly. It was very interesting and had its own kind of pleasure. So Dada Bhadananda, I have asked him to give the introductions one by one of our speakers. So the first speaker will be Ramesh. Second speaker will be Amritdhara, and I will be the third. We'll each be speaking for about 15 minutes, and then there will be, we're planning on about 40 minutes time for questions and answers. So please, you feel very welcome. We encourage you that as the program is going on and as questions are occurring to you, that you put them in the chat. Yeah, it is better to ask something than nothing in most cases. And if you want to ask even more than one or two things, you're very welcome. Whether we'll get time to answer them all or not, we have to see. All right, so thank you very much, and I turn the program over just now to Dada Bhadananda. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dadaji, for that nice introduction. Our first speaker today, our first presenter is Brother Ramesh. We're Bjonnes, and Ramesh is currently the director of the Prama Wellness Institute based in Asheville, North Carolina, and they have numerous programs there related to health and Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, and Ramesh is the main emphasis there is the detox of the body and excellent health through a plant-based diet. Ramesh is also he studied yoga therapy in Nepal and India, and Ayurveda at the California College of Ayurveda. And he's the author of 5 books as well. So without further ado, we will invite Brother Ramesh or Bjonnes to give his presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, Dadaji, for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen and start my introduction to Ayurveda. Let's see here. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to give a brief introduction to a vast subject that is 4,000 years old. So you have to bear with me, or even longer, because there is, according to Anandamurti, a strong relationship between Ayurveda and Tantra even. And according to Anandamurti, the philosophy of Ayurveda came from Shiva, all the way from Shiva. So 7,000 years of history. I'm going to talk primarily about food and diet and how that affect us, because this was my experience. I was sick about 15 years ago with a chronic illness, and through cleansing and then understanding my own body type or my own dosha, I was able to heal. The cleansing part, the detox part, was very much part of this, and this is something that is central to Ayurveda. Good digestion is central to most of the natural systems of healing, and certainly in Ayurveda. And so I want to mention this proverb here: when lifestyle is wrong, medicine is of no use. When lifestyle is right, medicine is of no need. This, in a way, is the central teaching of Ayurveda, that health comes by understanding how our own body and its needs are, so that we can fulfill the needs of the body, mind, and the spirit. Ayurveda is a yogic science, and it has to do with balance. And the second quote here, your food is your medicine and your medicine is your food, came from Hippocrates. Hippocrates was actually influenced by Ayurveda. Greek medicine and early medicine was influenced by Ayurveda early on. These 2 principles are also very fundamental to Ayurveda. Like increases like, and opposites decrease each other. So what does that mean? It means that simply when you're cold and you go out in the cold or don't have enough clothes, you will of course be more cold. When you're cold, get warm. But these simple principles also relate to digestion and how we function physically and mentally and so on. The opposite decrease each other. That means that, let's say you are Vata, which we will get into and try to understand, a Vata personality that tends to do many different things and not be so disciplined, then the key to balance that is to become more disciplined. Similarly, if you eat too much, then you need to eat less. These are some of the simple, basic principles of Ayurveda. Getting back into balance, we do the opposite. If we get out of balance, we tend to do more and more of the things that we're not supposed to do. So as I mentioned, Ayurvedic philosophy and yoga philosophy are coming from the same trunk. And the basic principle is that there is 2 principles in cosmology, Purusha and Prakriti, which is consciousness and energy. And when we talk about Ayurvedic healing, we are generally dealing with the Prakriti side. And the purpose of balancing Prakriti is so that we can move back into consciousness, so that we can feel more and more consciousness. And that is also the purpose of yoga. The purpose of yoga is to gain spiritual liberation. The purpose of Ayurveda is to gain physical, mental balance so that we can have a better chance at gaining spiritual liberation. There are three principles in nature, according to Ayurveda: Sattva guna, Raja guna, and Tama guna. And the purpose of Ayurveda is to balance these principles and to become more and more sattvic. Then there are also five elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth. These five elements is what nature is composed of. And because we are nature, these five elements are also a part of us. And that is where the dosha theory comes from, the tridosha theory of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So each dosha has all of the five elements. So if you're predominantly Vata, for example, meaning you're relatively thin or tall or short or thin, you have a lot of energy, you move a lot, you're very fast thinking, but you have a tendency not to be so disciplined. You may have a tendency not to eat regular meals and so on. That means that you have a lot of the space and air principles, but also it means that you have a tremendous ability to move towards spirituality, because the consciousness is made up of these two elements, space and air. So, or predominantly. So, Pitta, the personality, or the Pitta body, is more medium-sized, medium muscles, has fire and water, and has, because of the fire element, a very strong digestion and has the ability to digest food very well. Also is mobile, a lot of energy, and can be sometimes explosive and have a tendency towards anger. On the physical level, there may be problems with digestion of too much inflammation, skin issues, and so on. Bear with me, because Ayurveda is both simple in a way, but also extremely complex. So I'm just giving a very brief introduction to all of this. The Kapha body, or the Kapha personality, has bigger muscles, bigger bones, generally tall or short, but the body is big and the muscles are strong, generally moves slower, and has a tendency on a mental level to procrastinate and overeat and like sweet foods and so on. So a Kapha person needs to become more energetic, whereas a Vata person needs to slow down and be more disciplined. A Kapha person actually needs to be more energetic and exercise more and so on, and take care that he or she is not eating too much. So how do we balance these doshas? So Vata is space and air, as I said. And because of the space and air, Vata tends to be cool and cold. And in the wintertime, a Vata person tends to have cold hands, feet, and so on. So a Vata person needs to keep warm. They need to keep calm and be disciplined, and not, when they're stressed, take on another job or another activity, which they have a tendency to do. They need to eat less raw, dry, and cold food, because digestion is cool. And so, especially in the fall and winter season, they need to eat warm, soupy, liquid foods and so on. And also avoid extreme cold temperature. And as I said, eat warm, soupy foods and spices, and keep regular routine with asanas, meditation, and so on. And if they do that, they become great yogis. A Pitta body, which is composed of mainly fire and water, needs to, because of the fire, needs to avoid excess heat. spicy foods, oily, spicy, fried foods, which they have a tendency to consume because they feel that I can consume anything because my digestion is so great. Limit salt intake, eat more cooling, non-spicy food, and eat cooling drinks, but not ice drinks. Ice drinks is not really good for any of the types or any people. And exercise during the cool time of the day. The Kapha body, composed of water and earth, as I said, needs to get plenty of exercise, avoid heavy foods, keep active, exercise, vary the routine. Of course, with our asanas and our meditation, we need to be regular, but in other ways, it is good to vary the routine. And this, regarding the food, this is very, very important for a kapha body, which is to avoid dairy foods, milk, cheese, yogurt, wheat especially. There's a book called The Wheat Belly, which is basically about this, that we tend to increase our fat if we eat too much wheat. Carbs in general needs to be limited. Avoid ice drinks and so on, and fatty and sweet and oily foods, and eat much lighter, drier foods like salads, apples, vegetables, and so on. Now, so that gave you a very brief overview, very fast, but brief, all the three body types. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about food and taste and how they affect us. So one of the great things about Ayurveda is that the acknowledgement of the 6 tastes in food. There was a study done recently asking people, what is the most tasty food of all of the indigenous foods in the world? And Indian food won. The scientists that conducted the study had no idea why that was the case, but when they did further investigation, they realized it was because of these 6 tastes, because Indian food, and especially Ayurvedic thali food, combines all of the 6 tastes, which creates a balanced meal. So it will take too much time, I think, to go into all of the different types of food, but basically bitter foods, pungent foods, astringent foods, sweet, sour, and salty. And for Vata, it is very important, as I mentioned earlier, that they avoid, cool foods and dry foods, but also foods that are bitter, astringent, and spicy in nature can be consumed in moderation, but not overconsumed. So especially bitter and astringent food should not be eaten in large quantities for a Vata personality. Vatas have to protect themselves from overdoing anything and everything, which I also mentioned. This is really very, very important for the Vata. For Pitta, the foods to avoid are salty and sour and very spicy foods, and fried oils, which I mentioned, can be consumed in moderation, but not overconsumed. And for Kapha,
Ramesh, if I can just remind you, you have about 3 minutes left or so.
Okay. Foods that are sweet, sour, and salt in nature can be consumed in moderation, but not overconsumed. And especially foods, as I mentioned, that are sweet in nature, like dairy and so on, is very important for Vata. For Kapha to avoid or to reduce. I mentioned, I will finish with this, that these principles, like increases like. In other words, if you do too much of a thing that drives you out of balance, you will increase imbalance. So you need to do the opposite, and the opposite will decrease the imbalance. And that is in relation to diet, in relation to spices, in relation to exercise, in relation to emotional attitudes as well. If you are fighting with anger, then of course you have to work on that and stay out of situations that increases the anger vritti. I mentioned also that I would talk just briefly about the tea or a chai, non-caffeine chai, which is very good for the digestive system, especially in cold weather, like we are having in the Western Hemisphere now. In the wintertime, a mixture of turmeric, ginger, cardamom, black pepper, cinnamon, fennel, and cloves. Cloves is extremely high in antioxidants and very good for fighting viruses. Some of these spices, as we see, are increasing the Pitta dosha, but if we mix it with milk or soy milk, then that reduces the Pitta dosha. So that's how how Ayurveda is very specific and very detailed in understanding the natural energetic principles of food and spices and so on. So the K minus means that it reduces Kapha, but it increases Vata and Kapha for turmeric, for example. So that is how we can read how we can use spices and foods. So that was my short introduction to food and diet in terms of Ayurveda. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ramesh. It was excellent, enlightening for, I think, most people. And now, Dada Shilabhadrananda, if you can please introduce Brother Amritadhara. Thank you.
Yes, can you stop the screen share? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so our second speaker today is our brother Amritadhara, Ivan Skofenko. And Amritadhara is an experienced yoga therapist and a practitioner of Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine. He's taken a one-year course from the Ayurvedic College in India, and he's trained over 100 instructors and leaders in Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, both in the Ayurvedic science and in yoga therapy. So we welcome Brother Amritadhara to share his wisdom in the next 15 minutes of our webinar.
Namaskar, everyone. I will start with sharing one slide. In my presentation, I will attempt during this short time to show how biopsychology and Ayurvedic concept are working together. As Ramesh covered, that they all have the same foundation and same source. And when we look at the biopsychology concept, so it's it explains us and teaches us how our mind is working and how it's related to chakras. So we all know that different chakras are responsible for different propensities of the minds, for different thought and emotion inclinations. And the same chakras, they're controlling principal elements, basic elements that constitute doshas. Ramesh already mentioned that doshas constitute certain basic elements, like Kapha is made from Jala and Prakriti, it's a water and earth element, and Pitta is made from Jala and Agni, it's a water and fire, and Vata dosha is made of space and air, Vayu and Akash. So these actually three doshas, it's not certain like material things in our body. These are processes in our body. Vata dosha is basically responsible for movements in our body. Whatever moves in our body, movements of our blood, air, energy, it's movements of limbs. It's all the work of Vata dosha. Pitta is responsible for other processes in our body. It's a fire element. It burns, it decomposes, it heats, it warms, it maintains a temperature. And Pitta itself, to move through the body, it takes the help of Vata processes. So without Vata, Pitta can't move. So that's why the combination of doshas, that's what makes body alive. So Kapha is responsible for growth, for renovation. So it's in positive way and negative way is same. When our body is growing and we have certain tissues rejuvenating, it's all because of work of Kapha. In the same way, Vata dosha brings elements to it, and Pitta dosha uh, breaks out our food and brings it to the blood, and rasa first, then it goes to the blood, and then to the help of Vata, it's moved through the body. So they all are working together, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And Ramesh explained in his presentation that like makes like, right? So if we eat food that has more certain elements, so each food contains also of these basic elements. There is food with Vayu element predominant. There is food with fire element predominant. There is food with Jala and Priti elements predominant. So if we want to increase Vata, so we're going to eat food with air element and Akash element. Akash is actually space. It's hard to understand how space can be element, but if we eat food with which contains a lot of air element, we increasing Vata dosha processes in our body. If we eat food with water and earth elements, then we're increasing Kapha. If we eat food with the predominance of fire, we're increasing dosha processes in our body. So, um, so again, the doshas are processes in our body, but the elements itself in Ayurveda called dhatus. There are 7 dhatus and described in Ayurveda.
We lost.
We lost him.
In the meantime, while we're waiting for Brother Amritadhara to come back, I think.
Hello?
Oh, is he?
He's back.
I think
I
something.
think he's back. I think.
Hello?
Is he back?
Something with connection, I think.
Yeah, you can
so
start
the
again.
doshas are processes in our bodies, but
Okay. So if there are any moment that he's not here, to make it easier for many of us to understand, just in a really simple way. Oh, it looks like Amritadhara is back. Go ahead, Amritadhara.
hello?
Yes, we
Yeah,
see you.
we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the doshas are processes, but the tissues itself are called dhatus. So the dhatus are formed, and dhatus are brought to life, and the life itself maintained by the balance of all 3 doshas. We can't say that one is good, other is bad. We need 3 of this process to make to keep ourselves healthy. But when one process dominates in the body, it starts creating problems. And one another concept I want to share here is a Prakriti and Vikriti. Prakriti, it's actually our constitution. So we can be Vata dosha predominant person or Kapha dosha predominant person, but it doesn't mean we're sick or we're ill or we have certain disease. But Vikriti, when one of these doshas go too high, and then it creates health problems. And there can be different health problems. Usually when the health problem has only one dosha involved, one process involved, then it's easy to cure. When two doshas are involved in that disease, then it's harder to cure. When three doshas are involved, it may be incurable disease. So the more doshas are involved, the harder to cure, because it has a practical implication too. While curing one dosha, we can either disorganize another dosha or bring it out of balance. So the art of Ayurveda is how to cure one dosha without negatively affecting other dosha, and how these doshas are related to our karma, because karma is made of samskaras, and samskaras, they not anywhere in the heaven or somewhere else. They're inside of our personality, in our minds. So, and those samskaras are represented by vrittis. They causing our mind fluctuate, and these vrittis, they affect how chakras work, and these vrittis, they affect how these basic elements works in our body. So if I'm angry person, I say this the same way. The Ayurveda says that dosha, the Prakriti, that the constitution is inborn. So we born with it. So, and how we born with it? Because our karma determines how our what vrittis we have, and how our basic elements in our bodies will work. And this actually, our dosha types, is helping us to realize, to implement that karma in our life. So if I'm a person who is tend to be angry, it will, my angriness will disturb my fire element in our body, and fire element is making my pitta dosha, and then my pitta dosha will be out of balance. So due to my anger, my pitta goes out of balance. But it works the opposite way. So if due to my food, due to my lifestyle or food I take, I increasing my pitta dosha, that is actually already is dominated in my body. So this way, through food, I'm increasing my tendency to anger. So another sign of pitta dosha may be uh, tiredness or fatigue. When we have too much pitta, pitta is responsible for working our intellect. And when it's too much dosha, our intellect becomes tired and fatigued. So some people who have high acidity, they may feel sometimes, they don't feel that, it's here in the chest, but they may feel that then their acidity is high. They feel tired, they feel fatigued, they can't concentrate. This is another sign of pitta. So a lethargy of vata is not the same like fatigue of pitta. It's a bit different, because vata is kapha is in generally slow. Sorry, I meant kapha. Kapha is in generally slow and lethargic. It's a general tendency, but pitta get fatigue when it's the pitta start affecting intellect. So the same with kapha dosha, same with vata dosha. Say kapha, it has tendency to fear and anxiety, and that fear and anxiety can lead the vata dosha disbalance. But in the same way, if I'm exposing myself to air, cold, or I'm eating vata aggravating food, it will increase my tendency to be anxious and to be fearful. The same with kapha dosha. If I eat too much sugar and my kapha is already high, so that sugar creates more lethargic and more kapha and more mucus in my body. And sugar has another effect on my body. Sugar creates craving. And if we look at Muladhara chakra vrittis, we can say that uh, one of the main tendencies that hides in Muladhara chakra is tendency of getting pleasure. And that's what we want. We want eating sugar. And the more sugar we eat, we're creating more craving for sugar. And the sugar gets like too much imbalance in our body. So for example, and while creating that craving, we increasing all other tendencies to get pleasure, we actually becoming greedy. So this way, how doshas disbalance can affect our mind, and in the same way, our minds can affect our health. This how the general concept of karma can be connected to vata dosha and concept of Ayurveda, doshas concept. So this is very, very interesting. I mean, like the karma, samskaras, then vritis, then basic elements, then comes doshas and dhatus, the tissues. So this how it's actually all are connected. So other chart I want to show is actually more in detail that what was on the picture. So here the vritis of Vishuddha chakra and Anahata chakra. So here we may see a good, like the vritis that are pushing us to spiritual practices, and vritis are very noble, making our minds kind of creating noble tendencies in our minds. In the same way,
Amritadhara, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're seeing the chart that you're screen sharing. If it's a different chart, you need to first stop the screen share and then share and then switch to the other one. We're still seeing the doshas and panchatattva with the seven chakras. Okay. That's what we see.
Okay, so then I will
stop that screen share
sharing this, and I will share this one then.
Okay. No, you have to first. Yeah. Okay.
You see it now? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
So here, for example, Anahata chakra has that some vritis that gives us that emotions of anxiety and fearfulness. So and also, but this is fear of vata is not an aggression of vata that vata dominating people can express. It's not the same aggression that pitta has. We would say vata has irritation because of anxiety rather than aggression, whereas pitta is really angry. So yeah, here the vata. Apart from doshas, there are concept of sub-doshas. It's actually a certain part of doshas that are making work in that make work in different parts and organs of our body. I mentioned them in the chat here. So to be able to understand what processes, say breathing is mostly regulated by vata dosha, but with the help of kapha dosha too. So speech is also work of vata, particularly udana vata, or udana vaya sometimes it's called. So movement of a stool through our digestive tract, it's a work of vata, whereas work of pitta to break down the food we eat. So and then
I'm sorry if I can interject. If you can, will you be able to finish in about 3 minutes?
Yeah, I will just I will. Thank you for a reminder. So and what I want to also mention before I finish, so the yoga practices. When you look at the yoga practices, I mentioned few breathing exercises. I'm avoiding using word pranayama because pranayama is also it should be practiced with the help of acharya, because it may lead. What is danger with pranayama that if we do asanas wrong, we feel it right away. But when we do pranayama and something is wrong, we don't feel it right away, and we may end up with certain metabolical diseases without knowing the actual reason. That's why we need to be very careful. Also, I'm not mentioning here particular asanas. There are a few asanas I mentioned for kapha dosha, but I'm not mentioning particular asanas for each dosha, because it's not what asana is making dosha balance or taking it out of balance. Same yoga pose can bring, say, vata to balance, or take it out of balance. So it's depending how you do it. When I was just starting my practice as a Ayurveda therapist, I very often heard from people that they were telling, oh, when I'm practicing these asanas with you, my back gets better. But when I practice at home, because of the same poses, my back gets worse. Because it's not only poses, but how you do them, how much time you have between poses to rest. It's either 2-3 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, or you just do them without not like, non-stop. Or how long you stop the position. Do you hold the position for a few seconds? These all things are making difference how a particular asana will influence dosha and will influence the mind. So do I have 1 minute more?
Oh yeah, please go ahead. 1 minute more.
Yes.
Yeah. So another thing that, say, when we practice for Vata, we need to be careful not to exhaust ourselves, but in the same way, poses, yoga asanas, they should make us concentrate, because Vata needs stability, and Vata needs to be able to focus mind and to hold it, because Vata's mind is restless. Pitta tends to overheat. Pitta tends to angerness, to that anger, and Pitta tends to compete. So when we practice yoga with Pitta people, so we need to be careful not to involve people into competition. Ask people to concentrate, and we need to give enough time between poses to cool down, but it should not be too long. So, and when we practice breathing exercises, we need to practice more breathing exercises when we inhale through mouth slowly. It's actually cooling down our bodies. So with Kapha, so we need to practice intense, right? So here we have Tandava, we have Kaushiki. We need to hold poses for pretty long time to make person to feel effort. It will be different for each person depending on physical stamina and shape. Say beginners may feel effort after 5 seconds, experienced practitioners maybe after 15 seconds or 50 seconds. So, and here we should avoid long pauses, long relaxation, and we need to try to help person to be alert and to be focused, take out the personality out of that lethargy. Yeah, and as a conclusion, I would say Pitta is very focused, have a willpower, but if there's no enough Vata there, this all willpower will be materialistically oriented. We need some lightness there, some kind of some air, to make person's mind be a little bit how to say more light, not so focused on materialistic things. In the same way, we if Vata wants to make a habit of something, then that Vata will need to have Kapha, because Kapha is stability. To be able to do something regularly, to practice meditation, to practice anything regularly, we need to have some Kapha there to help us to be stable in something. Thank you. I'm done. I tried to do it fast.
Yes, it was very beautiful and enjoyable and intense. Okay.
You can remove the screen share, Amritdhara. Please remove the screen share.
Trying to
Thank you.
Stop. And
Go ahead, Dada Dharmavedananda.
Yes, thank you so much, Amritadhara. Wonderful. Lot to take in, but yeah, we'll try to answer some of the questions that have come from your interesting talk. And our third presenter is Dada Dharmavedananda himself. And Dadaji has been a yoga monk for 50 years, and he has taught yoga practices, meditation, and natural therapy, organized social service programs in more than half of the countries around the world. In 2005, Dadaji founded the Global Network of Ananda Marga Wellness Centers, and he has been giving in-depth yoga naturopathic training to hundreds of people and enabling many thousands of patients to heal themselves through natural means. And these centers, the headquarters is in Cebu in the Philippines, but there are others in India, Fiji, in Taiwan, and North Carolina. So welcome, Dadaji, for your presentation.
Namaskar. My knowledge of naturopathy developed long before my understanding of Ayurveda. But I felt lucky because when I started to study Ayurveda, I understood that just by chance, I was using some techniques in Ayurveda to help me a lot. And then it expanded my understanding very much of how to treat our own patients. I'd like to give there are many who are participating in this program who do understand about Ayurveda, but there are some of you who don't, and for whom it's completely new. And here I just want to put on the screen, as you can see, 3 words which are an injustice to really explaining what is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, but at least they help a little bit, especially somebody who has no real knowledge of them. In fact, they can help a lot in understanding our tendencies. So, example, a person who is Vata in nature, her mind is changing all the time, and a lot of multitasking is there, and the word that has been used repeatedly is air. So that person needs to be more grounded. Means what they really need, the most important thing that they may need, it may be discipline or routine, which both these are elements which both Brother Ramesh and Brother Amritdhara have mentioned. And Pitta, the person is very intense in nature, so it was mentioned, intense, strong digestion, and they need to, in some way, they need to relax and slow down to balance it with their Kapha nature. And the Kapha people, they require any way that they can. So example, for a Pitta person, to give more importance to Kirtan that is very, very valuable, to relax and to take time and sleep a little bit more. And the Kapha person, that individual is going to find any way to cause themselves to speed things up. And so here, all of us have all of these 3 tendencies. The problem is when 1 or 2 of them are dominating. And I think we are aware, each of us, about ourselves, especially in light of these 3 points, but also when you will study the chart of Brother Amritdhara, you'll understand much more about yourself. Then we understand what we should do. As I said, I was lucky because of my whatever I have. My nature has been Vata Pitta mostly, and so fortunately I was able to understand when at a young age that I really have to be strong in my routine. I don't know how I came to that understanding, but it was very different from how I lived when I was younger. And I understood because of my Pitta nature. I didn't know these words at the time, but I was naturally I felt I had to do more and more Kirtan or else I would explode. Now, keeping these in mind, you see, I mentioned that I was Vata Pitta. Most of us are a mix. There's very few people who are dominated by one or the other, and therefore the instructions, the guidelines which are given that a Vata person should do this or a Kapha person that, these things in many, many ways, they require adjustments. Just for example, over time, especially. For example, if the person has incorporated more routine in their life, they may get hyper about it to some extent, and their Pitta increases, even though the Vata has decreased. And so we have to see that. Another example is that I think that Ramesh was mentioning, or someone was, yeah, Ramesh, that a Vata person should be avoiding, for example, raw food. But on the other hand, so what is happening with their other doshas? Raw food may be good for somebody who has some degree of Vata tendency, but we will know in particular about that if by eating raw food, it causes them to become more gassy. That gassiness is a tendency which is quite common with Vata. So if the Vata tendency is very strong, then yeah, raw food can be disturbing to them. And in some cases, we can only give cooked food to the individual. Now, if I'm going to, or predominantly, if I'm to look at these things in light of naturopathy, so I want to share something else here, and that is that, one moment, I'll stop the screen share and start again in a moment. I want to fix that chart. Yeah. Okay, so it's fundamental in Ayurveda as well as naturopathy that we have, that our body with most diseases is afflicted with various toxins. It's afflicted with anything which is inside the body which should not be there. And that is usually a result of wrong eating habit, but it can easily be the result of other wrong habits. So as Brother Ramesh was saying in the beginning, if a person's lifestyle is excellent, then their need for medicine will not be, they won't need it. Well, the same thing is true. They're not going to need any therapies. But looking at these factors here, if a person has mucus, excess mucus in their body, then we can be sure that they need to be detoxing. And I'm just going to flash through more of these conditions here. If a person has a cough, maybe a wet cough or a dry cough, they need to detox, sure. If they have a sore throat, if they have a fever, these are so common nowadays with COVID. If they have muscle ache, again, a common COVID symptom. And that's why we see with these various symptoms that those who have COVID, if they're doing detoxing, which I'll talk about, so many of you know the thing, and that's why I'm going through big presentations in very brief time, because you know these things, but maybe need a little bit of reminding. That's why those who have COVID, if they do a detoxing cleanse for 3 days, then they can get through maximum of their symptoms, but still the COVID will hang on, so then they can compromise the detox, the graduated fast somewhat, and get a very, very good result. I've seen that without exception, all the persons, and I've seen many, many people having COVID here in Maharlika, in Cebu itself. Breathing problems, constipation, huge. This is so common. It's so common that many people have constipation and they don't even recognize it. It means they don't have bowel movement every day, or their bowel movement is incomplete. Diarrhea, excess gas, acidity, acid reflux when it's coming up through the throat, loss of appetite, Nausea means the tendency for vomiting. Dizziness, these are all symptoms which need detoxing. Headache. So, of course, occasionally there's exception to this. A person their body may be in such a way that if they do, if their detox is, I shouldn't say exception, but adjustment. If the detox is too strong, it can bring out the symptom too quickly. So now we look at the systems of how to detox, and the strongest is the lemon calamansi water. So many of you know these things. And then you've got herbal tea, apple cider vinegar, coconut water. These are more and more mild detoxes, which will take longer time, but still get good result, because the strong detox may be too strong and the symptoms increase rather than decrease. Citric fruit juice, water with a little honey, other fruit juices. This is very slowly making the fast easier and easier. Lactobacteria drinks, that means this is not yogurt. It means, for example, water, kefir, or there's a drink that is made from some mushroom. It's not really. Well, no, I wasn't thinking. Rejuvelac is there, but many people know this one. What is it? There's a kind of mushroom drink which is common.
Kombucha.
Oh yeah. So that is, kombucha. Yeah. What is it again?
Kombucha.
Kombucha.
Okay. Right. So that's and it is not made from mushrooms. It is another bacteria, so it's all right. Citric fruits is slower. Juicy fruits even more slow. All other fruits, including the super ripe banana, but not including starchy fruits. And then we get to even slower. We'll go into the vegetables. All of these vegetables can be eaten raw, but if they are inappropriate for the person to take raw, then they can be taken steamed or in a soup. And even for the person for whom they are appropriate raw, they may want to mix depending on the weather. Raw, juicy, young sweet corn and young peas, and that's as far as the detoxing menu goes.
Excuse me, Dadaji, you have 3 minutes to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last, it still includes extra virgin oil. Now, these are very, very effective in treating ourselves. So, but it may be that a person will detox and still they have difficulty to heal. It's very common. And then we will consider, what is another factor that is out of balance? The out of balance may be obvious, or it may be something which is just in conflict with your Ayurvedic type, your Ayurvedic dosha. So somebody may not be eating too much, but the food that they're eating is harmful for them. It means it is fried or sugar or refined grains, etc. And otherwise, we need to analyze, just as we need to analyze what is somebody's Ayurvedic type. They can fill out a questionnaire, and then through an interview, you can find out which of their different aspects are affected by different doshas. So then we need to look one by one, starting with the easiest condition to change, at what is a defect with their lifestyle. So the second one is their water drinking is not appropriate. The third one is that they may not be doing asanas regularly, or they may be doing wrong asanas, or they may be doing asanas which, as Brother Amritdhara was explaining, are being done in the way which is inappropriate for them. Very, very common for people who are doing spiritual practices. They may not be doing cardiovascular exercise, super common among the teachers as well. or we have to consider their nutrients, and that means supplements as well as elements which can help them to overcome constipation, like triphala, which is an Ayurvedic medicine and very, very basic. It's got all the 3 doshas in it, as well as psyllium husk fiber. And then many people, they're following everything appropriately, but their kirtan, their meditation is poor. And then you have the points of sun and mud and other kinds of treatments are there. And in this way, you can analyze and understand what is the person's need and how we can help them. So it's a very simple system which improves tremendously when it's looked at in the light of Ayurveda. Thank you. And now we'd like to look at questions that you all may have. I'll stop my screen share.
I think Brother Keshava wanted to make a few announcements, and then we can go to the questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Yes, everyone. Thank you for joining. I just have a couple announcements before we get on to the question and answer. I will be posting a link in the chat for any financial offerings that will support our upcoming activities and services if anyone wants to make an offering. And I also want to post
Can we highlight Keshava, please, so everyone can see?
no, I'm reading at the same time, but I can spotlight myself. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm just reading here off of my notes here. Yes, so we'll post a link for those who would like to make a payment, a financial offering, and I'll also post a link for our website for more information. But we have some events coming up, natural yoga therapy. We have some events coming up in May. We'll have a short detox online fasting program. And for all of the grads and naturopathy course that have taken Dada Dharmavedananda's course in Cebu, we will be having a refresher course beginning in March, so stay tuned for that. And I'd also like to prompt Dada Dharma to introduce the naturotherapy intensive. And I think that's about it before we get on the question and answer. Okay, so Dada Dharma, would you like to briefly talk about the naturopathy intensive?
Yeah. Thank you, Keshava. You know, I've been avoiding all these years to give an online course in naturopathy. I would very much prefer, I mean, we have lots of online events, we have coaching, and we have these kind of seminars and webinars and so on. And that will go on, sure, for probably forever. But as to a real training program, I much prefer to do it in person. There are so many elements of in-person training which cannot be kept online. However, and if the travel conditions allow, then we will have our next training program in India, 1 month training program. And I love that program, and everybody who attends it really enjoys it. If travel is still impossible after some months, then we may give a short course, not a 1 month course, but for example, a 5-day, 7-day program. And so that you can get certain minimal tools of naturopathy, not necessarily that you can really do coaching perfectly, but it will be, will give you a lot of confidence. So you'll hear more about that, whether it's going to be whether it will be a live training or whether it's going to be online. Okay, so the first question that I have is, can you suggest a book or website where we could find lists of food combinations that should be avoided? So I prefer to not try to answer that question, but leave this up to either Ramesh or Brother Amritdhara. Which of you would like to answer that?
Um, well, I can try. As I said in the beginning, Ayurveda is simple in a way, but also very complex. And it is very easy to get confused when we start figuring out what dosha I am and so on, what my imbalance is, and doing that on your own through the internet without having proper guidance. So my suggestion would be, if you have some serious issues that you would like to work on and change, to consult with an Ayurvedic practitioner and then understand what your Prakriti and what your Vikriti is, as Amritadhara was mentioning, because we need to find out what our predominant dosha is, which is the Prakriti or Prakriti. And then if we have a Vikriti imbalance, then we need to find that out and then develop a diet based on that. That would be my suggestion.
What does
If
it
you
mean,
want to,
Vikriti imbalance?
Vikriti is the imbalance that we tend to develop over time. So in my case, for example, it was I started gaining weight in my late 40s. So my Vikriti developed due to eating wheat and dairy products. Yeah, you know, the same diet that I grew up with in Norway, living in a very warm climate in California. And because my body is also Kapha Pitta, so I developed the Kapha imbalance. So that's my Vikriti. My Prakriti is Kapha, but when my Kapha goes out of balance, that is the Vikriti. So you can be a balanced Kapha, meaning have strong muscles, strong body, and not be out of balance, not have a Vikriti imbalance. But over time, as we age, we tend to develop an imbalance in our predominant dosha.
Clear. Okay. So so you're not going to suggest any book or website?
I mean, Amritadhara may have a different suggestion, but in general, it takes a lot of study to develop clarity around these issues.
Amritdhara, would you like to add anything to that?
I have a similar opinion that that is very hard to suggest, and this is something that people need to, I think, study on their own. And first of all, as Ramesh said, uh, uh, each individual who is going to make a program for himself or herself, they need to understand their own Vikriti and Prakriti. Prakriti, what their personality is, and what Vikriti is, what their disease is. Because there are many diseases which are not one dosha, but two doshas or three doshas. And if we are trying to take diet for this dosha, it may aggravate another dosha. And person will say, hey, I was taking Vata diet, following Vata diet, but I'm feeling worse now because there is another dosha involved there. And another thing to take into consideration, it's a digestion power. Sometimes people may take certain diet, but their digestion power is not strong enough to digest that meal or that medicine. What I will suggest that apart from that specific food what we can eat, there are another recommendations about diet in Ayurveda. So say that heavy meals should be eaten during noontime for lunch, or avoid snacks between your main meals. And there are many things like don't drink water right before you take meal, because it subsides your digestion power, because it's actually dissolves those juices, digestion secretion. And there are many other recommendations apart of just eat this and don't eat this. And one more thing I want to share that is sometimes you may notice in different books, one food is recommended for this dosha, another is not. It may not be related to that those authors are having different opinion or from different schools of Ayurveda. It will depend on what the form of you eat it. Say ginger, dry ginger, grounded ginger in powder. It increases Pitta dosha. It increases Agni. But when it's juice of a fresh juice of ginger, it doesn't affect Pitta that much. It affects, but not that much. So, and say if I'm dealing with a person who has quite of Pitta, but not too much, but I need to work on their Kapha. So if I know their Pitta is strong enough, so I will avoid using dry ginger. Uh, I will just go to ginger juice, right? Rather than using dry ginger. Same about honey. Say honey is sweet and it's supposed to subside Vata, but not. Honey is actually increasing Vata, so and increasing Pitta. It's exemption from that rule that sweet taste is subsiding Pitta and subsiding Vata and increasing Kapha. No, honey is opposite. It will decrease Kapha and increase Vata and Pitta. That's why people who like sweet, they don't like to eat honey because honey has opposite properties. So we need to keep this all in mind when we are thinking about diet. So as Ramesh said, Ayurveda seems very simple, but in another way, it's very complicated.
Okay, it's getting more and more interesting. Now, second question that I see is, although Ramesh started to answer it in the chat, maybe we weren't all need some elaboration. Herbs for chai, chai means tea. Could you explain more? For example, turmeric, kapha, vata kapha. Does that mean to use less for kapha or less for vata kapha?
Yeah, I made a mistake actually. I realized afterwards that for turmeric I said kapha minus and vata plus and kapha plus, but it actually should be vata and pitta plus. So turmeric is good to reduce kapha, but if you have a pitta imbalance, it may increase that pitta imbalance. So that's how we use these. So for example, for a person that wants to lose weight, then turmeric is really good. If you have an ulcer, you don't want to use turmeric because it could increase that pitta, the fire in the ulcer and so on. But when you put all of these spices together and mix it with milk, that was my main point, because most of those spices increases pitta but decreases vata and kapha. And then when you mix it with milk or soy milk and so on, then you have a much more balanced. And then of course, this tea is very good in the cold season, in the fall and in the winter. It's a very good drink for the digestion and for the immune system. In the very hot season, it may be a little too hot for some people, for a pitta person perhaps, and you might take out the black pepper and the ginger.
Oh, okay, good. Brother Amritdhara, if you don't need to add anything to that, then I can look at the next comment. But did you want to add something, Amritdhara?
Oh, I think Ramesh covered this question.
Okay. There is a comment, not a question, from Ananta, and I would be good if one of you could elaborate on it. Pitta is catabolic, Kapha is anabolic, and Vata is metabolic. So is either of you familiar with the point that he's making? Okay, Brother Amritdhara, if you can say.
As I mentioned, that doshas are describing processes in the body. So it's not any material things. I just trying to find that post to read it. What exactly was told there?
As I'm saying, it's Pitta is catabolic, Kapha is anabolic, and Vata is metabolic.
Yeah, it's actually what how the doshas are described in the term in the modern terms. And when we in India they're studying together two medicines, Ayurvedic medicine, and it is how they explain this. It's this way. So anabolic activities of kapha is actually it's slow down. It's what you mentioned when you try to describe doshas. It's slows down processes and it cools down the body. So it will slow down digestion. It will slow down movements because it's make a person heavy. In the same way, pitta, it's intensified these all processes. So pitta will intensify, say, it will intensify the digestion. It will intensify it's how to say the heat, how we translate it. So it's intensify its all because the warmer body is warm. It's in the warmth of the body. It's responsible for how fast the processes are going in the body. Whereas kapha is, we say movement, but it's all exchanging of elements. It's taking elements from one place and bringing them to another place. It's these all processes we call vata dosha, and itself this definition is anabolic, catabolic, and metabolic. They're also very broad, so it's also very hard to explain. I mean, like just if we're putting that vata metabolic, pitta is anabolic and it's catabolic, it's hard to understand itself. But I think the main point is here. It's the doshas. It's descriptions of how our body works. So and understand the tendency. When we're talking about prakriti and vikriti, most likely our predominant dosha in our prakriti will be disturbed and will be vitiated first when we are not leading proper lifestyle. Say if I'm vata person, I more tend, I'm not vata person, I'm vata pitta, so I will tend more to neurological diseases. I will tend more with problems like with like mobility of my body, like my muscles. I will tend more to have problems with like constipation and all. If I'm Pitta person, I tend more to have problems with my vision. I will tend more to have problems with like too strong digestion, ulcer, high acidity, skin problems. Say, for example, almost all skin infection with pus, it's all associated with Pitta aggravation. And with kapha person, will have more cold-like symptoms, will have more problems related to overweight and more the higher cholesterol and so on. However, there might be certain occasion and external factors that may vitiate that dosha that is not predominant in the body. Say vata person having unhealthy diet, taking food from McDonald's, taking fuzzy drinks, Coca-Cola, and so on, they will develop like say or kapha or pitta problems because of that. Even though those doshas may not be there predominant, but naturally we tend more have problems with that dosha that is predominant naturally. Or on the other hand, say pitta will rarely have problem with cold and all. Pitta predominant people like they're mostly like they enjoy cold because they like it. It subsides their anger. It subsides there, and and they will less likely to have problem with those that Kapha has. Whereas Vata, there are people like who eat whatever they want whenever they want and never gain weight. And Kapha Pitta become and they like my friend eating whatever they want. It's very hard to her kapha that much, so to get weight. So this processes that dosha, understanding doshas helps us to understand what risks we have, and in the same way when we're a treating person, we can understand more what to be conscious about. Say if I'm treating say like there's like asthma. Asthma is Vata Kapha disease. So it's mostly like Vata and Kapha vitiated. So I need to be careful when I'm working with Vata not to increase Kapha, or when I'm working with Kapha not to increase Vata. So I will warm up the Kapha without increasing Vata, and I will warm up the Vata not without increasing Kapha. So it's maybe like not, it's hard to to explain like in the short answer, but that's what I try to say.
Okay, but that stimulates a different question, and I think a very interesting one, because you said that for skin disease is a Pitta out of balance condition, whereas asthma is a Vata Kapha imbalance condition. And in naturopathy, we understand that if you suppress skin disease, it can easily become as asthma. If you suppress asthma, it can easily become skin problem. And so you've got something called, very commonly, some doctors will talk about skin asthma, which is really, it's shifting between the two. So if somebody suppresses the skin problem with some medicine, so why does, according to Ayurveda, why does that cause them to get this strong Vata or Vata Kapha out of imbalance? The medicine itself is causing this thing, the suppression. Ramesh, are you able to answer this question?
Maybe. Yeah, this is where things become a little more complex. But according to both naturopathy and Ayurveda, all diseases start in the digestive system, and a skin disease, a Pitta skin disease, for example, is generally corresponding to some kind of a redness, like any inflammations. In other words, that there is heat. And so when you are suppressing that heat, you're also suppressing the whole digestive system. In other words, your digestion isn't functioning properly. And Pitta is metabolic, not, and I think you wrote anabolic for Pitta, but as far as I understand, Pitta is metabolic.
Mm.
And so that whole metabolism, because Pitta governs that metabolism, it's driven underground and slows down, and then that produces things like phlegm and more kapha things that then start migrate upwards into the chest and can cause things like asthma and so on. And we see often a correlation between people who are eating dairy products and wheat, and they may have a gluten intolerance and an intolerance to dairy, and they often develop asthma. And then when they stop eating those, and also can have skin problems, and often when they stop eating those foods, then the asthma goes away, or they go through a cleanse and then they avoid eating those foods afterwards.
Okay. Due to shortage of time, I think we will keep going through the questions as briefly as we can. And this next question is, when someone has a disease such as cancer, osteoarthritis, or asthma, can the patient cure it by taking correct proportion of food according to the doshas? And I will prefer to answer that. And I'll say that in some cases, surely that will be so. That just by taking the food according to the advice of Ayurveda, the problem can be solved. But in so many cases, and I might consider even a majority of cases, only to change what food we are eating may not be enough unless you're making some very significant change. I mean, really significant change. For example, you eliminate milk products, you eliminate wheat products for certain categories of people. In fact, for a lot of people, these are very crucial changes to make, and they can make all the difference in the world just to make that change. Or if one stops taking fried food, or one stops taking sugar, these can have dramatic effects. However, in so many cases, they won't be sufficient in themselves. And for example, you've got the case that there are people who feel that they're eating really in a very perfect way, but they still have disease. And that in most cases is because they haven't done proper detoxing. They haven't got a base from which their health can grow. All right, if that is sufficient for you all, then I'll go to the next question. Or would you like to comment on that, either of the two of you?
I just want to add one thing that yes, modern Ayurveda said all the diseases originated from digestion or from the food we take, but it's actually there is another very, very big cause. It's our emotions and thoughts. It's also mentioned in the Ayurvedic text, but Ayurveda in the form what we see now, it doesn't suggest us much how to deal with it. Here where yoga comes into play with
Yep.
meditation and all other things. So also like that's why we need to take into account if we are dealing with cancer, it's a 3 dosha disease, and it's hard to work on it. So we need to work on like whole lifestyle, including and sleep and sex and the emotions and all here. This should be everything taken into account.
Yeah, I agree with that, Amritadhara, and I just wanted to say that, of course, our emotional life affects our digestion as well.
Yeah, and that's crucial in naturopathy as well. We've had many cases of persons who follow everything perfectly. They are improving radically, but then after some time, they can't improve because their mind has, they really need changes in their work or in their meditation or in their daily activities. I'll go
Yeah.
to the next. I'll go to the next question, but I think, and we can make short work of this question because in a sense, we just now answered it. I suffer from psoriatic arthritis. I recently eliminated meat, dairy, and bread from my diet. I also increased my water intake. How long before I see positive effects? So I'd like to make a stab at that and say that it depends. It depends whether doing those eliminations and increasing the water drinking is all that you really need or not. In many cases, yes, you should see a real result from that within a month. You'll start to see some changes taking place, but you may not see because it may require other change. It may require, for example, detoxing. Anyone wants to edit what I said?
Yeah, I agree, and I would go back to what I said in the beginning with that proverb in Ayurveda that when lifestyle is right, medicine is on a need, meaning the first thing we need to look at, and that's why it's so important to consult with someone to give you feedback and to analyze your lifestyle, your diet, your stress level, and all these things before we create a diet and an herbal plan and so on, detox plan. That is very important.
Okay,
So
oh,
yeah.
Amritdhara, go ahead. I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of things. When we are talking about rheumatoid arthritis, it's called in Ayurveda Amavata. It's because of toxins. So toxins that are accumulated in our joints, and they're causing inflammation, pain, and there is no that the cartilage is not regenerating probably. It's not growing probably. And here, sometimes water intake may be good. Sometimes excessive water will not be good because it's subsiding digestive power. We need to increase digestive power to burn that food properly, and we need to increase pitta, certain types of pitta in our body to burn that toxins. And application of heat, for example, uh, in some cases, dry heat is very good for Amavata. Dry heat, no oil at all. So oil is contraindicated in rheumatoid arthritis. And dry heat, it means you use sand or you use even salt. You just put them in the bag, you carry them. But again, it's not a recommendation, it's just information. So because I don't know what exactly is there, so I would not recommend it, but they're just describing practices. And the herbs will be helpful. Those herbs that has that effect, it has described. It's black pepper, ginger, like many herbs that they're spicy and they increase digestion. They will be helpful to burn that toxins that affecting joints. And this actually is it's in many cases it's treatable, but it takes a long time because we need to change here how pitta works and how body works. Why body accumulated so much toxin that it start affecting the joints. So we need to change how the body works, and we need to help the body to burn those toxins.
All right. Another question. I'm not sure. This might even be the last question. I'm not seeing. I'll look more, but what I'm seeing here. What if you are Vata Kapha, and therefore to treat each of these, the Vata and the Kapha, you're supposed to do opposite things. And she gives this is from Vanessa, and she gives a guess. They may have some conflicting paths of how to support or keep in balance. I have a strong expectation what the two of you will say, but I'll turn the question over to you.
Well, you may be perfectly fine being a Vata Kapha. You may be a great yogi and have a very happy, healthy life. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's an unusual combination in a sense. But so again, we need to find out what the Prakriti is and if there is a Vikriti and imbalance, and then we treat the imbalance. So if for example you're a Vata Kapha and you have a Vata imbalance, then we need to treat the Vata imbalances. If you have a Kapha imbalance, then we need to treat that. But you could also have a Pitta imbalance as a Vata Kapha. So again, it all depends on the situation.
Okay, I think that we'll have one last question here. Turmeric is not good for COVID, according to some experts. What's the view of Ayurveda?
May I take that question?
Sure.
There are good researches completed in India, in Delhi, in Japan. Yes, turmeric may not be good because turmeric increasing Vata, and breathing problems, it's mostly Vata problems, and very often related with Kapha, Vata Kapha problems. And what is recommended, there is one document that it's protocol for Ayurvedic and yoga therapy doctors in India. And there's a Ministry of Ayush in India, and they recommend certain treatment for COVID. And two herbs are predominantly recommending in the for prevention and for cure of COVID is would be ashwagandha and guduchi or giloy, another name of this herb.
At the same time, there's an additional question here. Oh, I think even more than this. What if the COVID is more of a blood problem than a breathing problem? Which is often the case. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Again, here we need to look at the person, right, individual, because Ayurveda doesn't treat disease. Ayurveda treats individual, adopted in the Western world, where the medicine treats diseases but not the person. So if there is a blood problem, then we are talking more about Pitta problems. We're talking more about Rakta vitiation. That Rakta is one of the Dhatus, blood. So then approach will be different. Then ashwagandha will not work. But guduchi still work. Guduchi is very good, or another name of the herb, Giloya, will be very helpful in that, because guduchi itself, it cures, it pacifies Vata. In the same way, it's curing Pitta but not increasing Pitta. It's actually bringing it to balance, and it's increasing a bit. How to say? It's increasing digestion to improving. And guduchi is the herbs that helps in fever. So that if COVID is associated with fever, guduchi will reduce it. Why I'm talking about guduchi and ashwagandha, because it's two very popular herbs, and it's a list of golden Ayurveda herbs, and they don't have so much side effects. I would say ashwagandha has some side effects and a lot of some contra in interdictions, but guduchi is very safe herb in general.
All right, thank you. There's Dada Dharmavedananda is saying, please answer one more question, one really last question. Would you be able to give natural remedy for COVID symptoms? I'll say part of it, and then if you guys want to add to this, that because we've had absolutely wonderful results with simple detoxing, it means to say that if the person has the sufficient capacity to tolerate near complete fasting, then straight away they enter into a juice fast. It's better not to give not sweet juices, because we don't know if that's going to disturb the individual or not. Or even better, for those who are comfortable with it, just a lemon water fast, of course, with a little bit of salt. It gives tremendously good results. At the same time, it is better that what one is drinking at that time is warm tending toward hot. I'm getting a few more questions here. But if the individual cannot tolerate it, then they may be taking just some vegetable soup and so on. And we get very good results with that. And what I would like to suggest, but please, if you can make your answers as short as possible, Ramesh and Amritdhara, if you want to suggest one or two herbs that you'd like, that you feel that the COVID patients should take. Of course, everyone is different, all the conditions are different, but just in general for a COVID patient.
I will be quick. As I mentioned, ashwagandha and guduchi, giloya. Ashwagandha can be taken as a prevention too with Ayurvedic honey. Ayurvedic honey is a purified honey. If someone has a high acidity or skin problems, easy to get, redness on red pumples on the skin, then ashwagandha is not recommended, and honey as well is better to go to.
Better to go to what? Better to go to what did you say?
Better to use guduchi, giloya.
Yeah. Okay.
It can be churna, it can be wine, it can be tablets. Now, very popular form is when they compress powder into tablets.
So these can easily be found online. Ramesh, did you want to add something to that?
Not really. The COVID issue is complex, and I am vaccinated. An Ayurvedic doctor here in town is vaccinated. So again, the vaccines work and it's preventive. Yeah, it all depends on the situation and your health, your age, and so on. But again, as Amritadhara is saying, Ayurveda is not treating a disease; it's treating the person, and that's so. I would take this with a grain of salt and be very careful about it, and consult, the right person.
I didn't mean to put the question whether to go with vaccine or not vaccine. Just, even people who are vaccinated, like myself, we may get some symptoms, so, but anyway, I think
Sure.
Amritdhara
Yeah.
gave some answer for
Yeah,
that.
that's what I'm saying. There are so many situations, so many variables,
All right. And Dada Shilabhadranan is saying, really, we have to deal one more question, and then we absolutely will close. And the question is, if Triphala is taken every day, will the body get used to it? And will that be a problem in the long run? I will answer that. And I will say that if a person's condition is not very intense, and they will use Triphala for some time, and they must adjust their lifestyle. If they are adjusting the lifestyle very nicely and doing whatever detoxing is required, if they're following everything from Ayurvedic perspective, from naturopathic perspective nicely, then they don't need to be taking the Triphala day after day forever. However, some persons, and if they do that, the result is not so good, because then they won't be motivated to make the changes in their lifestyle that they need. They'll become dependent on the Triphala. And gradually over time, it will get less effect. However, if an individual fundamentally their constitution is extremely weak, they have some fundamental problems, and no matter how much detoxing they do, no matter how much changes they make in their lifestyle, still problems will go on. It may also be because they had operation or whatever. Then if such an individual will be benefited by a small amount of Triphala every day, they may value from taking that from the rest of their life. So it differs from person to person. If one doesn't really have a real need to keep it going because you can make other changes so it's not required, that is much preferred, if possible. All right, we'll tie this up right now, and it's been very educational, a lot of fun, and we have the email addresses of almost everybody who's been participating, so we can follow up with various other opportunities which will come in the future. And unless either of you wants to add something more, or Dada Bhadananda wants to add something more, then we will turn to our final kirtan. So thank you very, very much. And let's have a final kirtan. Yeah, and enjoy Dada Priyarainjananda's beautiful singing. With our eyes closed, singing, it'd be very beautiful if you can sing from your side, but muted, except Dada.
Babanam Kevalam, 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 Babanam